You get to watch me on my phone. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm just sharing this to the feed on my profile. So let me go ahead and make sure you all see this. Share. Join me live now. Going there. Okay. All right. Cool. All right. Hear me if you're now live as always. But now it's been. I hope I'm going to be home. But I'll stop tonight. It's here. I'll do a own because it's fun. Should be working. I'm repeating them quite a few times per episode, but with the welcome screen and all that, and I'll be right back in a second. Clank. All right, welcome back. I am your host, Jason Aaron Wood, and this is ShredMentor Live. And tonight, for episode 64, we're going to be talking about exploring the fretboard. And we've talked about fretboard mastery and just kind of acquainting yourself with the fretboard a number of times in previous episodes. If you're watching live and you're in the chat, please let me know by telling me that in the chat that you can hear me. That would be great, because I know that the frame rate kind of sucks tonight. Again, I had it working pretty well for a couple minutes there, but then it stopped working nicely again. And so experience It's not clear. And I'm going to share with you some tools. So I'm going to pull that up right now. And what I was just playing along to as we were waiting for 8 o'clock sharp to arrive is one of the pages on guitar practice tools. These are the drones. And as you heard in the background under me playing, it's just one. Note, consistently sustaining for about 10 minutes. And that way it's uninterrupted. You don't have any other notes that you have to worry about, but it helps keep you in context, and that's a big part of what's going to help make what we do tonight meaningful, rather than just memorizing black dots on a fretboard diagram that have no internal meaning because they're all labeled with the same symbol, which is just ludicrous and stupid. So we won't be doing that here, but what we will do is build on things that you may already know. And I think that's always the best place to start, is start with whatever you already know, even if it's not a lot. If you know one scale, that's the place that you should start. Unless you really hate how that scale sounds and someone just taught it to you and it sucks and you don't like it, then shit can that. And let's go ahead and deal with a scale that actually sounds like the music that you want to deal with. And we'll be dealing with a small handful of different scales tonight. But one of the most important things is to understand what note spacing, the interval spacing that makes up the scale that you're playing, is everything. That is why that scale sounds like it does. Okay, now for a moment of Coke Zero. They don't sponsor this, but I wish they would. But I think I got a long way to go in followers to worry about that. So be sure to subscribe as well. Okay, so one of the things I want you to know right off the bat, though, okay, one of the things to really keep in mind as you do the things that we're doing tonight is that it's very important to try to arrive at what the rhythmic length of whatever you're playing is as soon as humanly possible, because that's going to determine whether you can actually use it musically, and it'll turn it into something that you will play like a musical figure rather than as a boring exercise that feels like a chore. All of your ability to create something with rhythmic feel and groove comes from knowing how many events happen in it. So that's going to be really vital for being able to use this stuff. Okay, so anyway, let's dive in a little bit, okay? One of the first things here is it's time to stop relying so much on just the fret numbers. Obviously, you need to pay attention to a fret number here and there, but don't rely solely on that. Instead, I want you to start thinking more about the interval spacing of your notes between the notes of the scale. Okay, so I'm going to use E minor today. I know I use A minor a lot for alphabetical convenience, but it doesn't really matter because A minor and E minor essentially are built on the same formula: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or more specifically, 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. Okay, as opposed to the major, which would just be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so that is to say notes 3, 6, and 7 are a half step lower in minor than they would be in major. So in E major, notes 3, 6, and 7 are a half step higher than they are in E minor. Okay, these are called parallel major and minor, not to be confused with relative major and minor, which are two different notes that have a major key or minor key starting from them and use the same 7 notes. That's called relative major and minor. In the case of E minor, the relative major is G major. And from G major, the relative minor is E minor. Okay, so they're a minor third apart. Okay, E, if E is minor, 1, 2, 3 half steps higher, that's where you find the relative major. And if you're on major, let's say I was E major, go 3 half steps lower, E major is the relative major of C sharp minor. So it's always a 3 half step difference between those, but that's relative major and minor. Tonight we're talking about parallel major and minor. Actually, only at this moment of tonight, so not all of tonight. So parallel major and minor are E major versus E minor. Same root, major or minor. Okay, so we don't hear much about that one, not nearly as much as you hear about relative major and minor. But It's because working with parallel major and minor is a bit more advanced, to be honest, to be able to make that change smoothly. Well, you can just luck out and try it, but yeah. Anyway, so comparing E major to E minor, notes 3, 6, and 7 will be different. And in the case of minor, all 3 of those notes will be lower in the scale. Otherwise, all the other notes are in the exact same place. That's why I'm telling you that. So let's deal with where the notes are in E minor. Okay, just using the open string. That's part of why I chose E minor. 1. That's note 1. Root note is 1. 2 is a whole step higher than that, and 3, the flat 3, is only a half step there. So memorize it just 3 notes at a time. All right, fretted, fully fretted, not using an open string, that would look like this. No matter where you go. That's what those notes are going to be. A whole step, then a half step. That is the first 3 notes of any minor scale, but in this case it's E minor. And that was an example of the multiple locations strategy at work, which we'll get into later on. Excuse me. Okay, so the next 3 notes, okay? That's 1, 2, and 3 of the scale. Note 4 is a whole step higher than that. Don't worry about it being fret 5. This is where we, again, selectively omit paying attention to the fret number. Pay attention to how far apart the note is from the last note you played. So 1, 2, 3, whole step to 4, whole step to note 5, half step to note 6. What do you know? That's the same exact interval pattern of 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, 6 is the same exact distance from each other. That's called a trichord, by the way. The 3 note scale fragment is called a trichord. So if you think of your first 3 notes as one trichord, and then the next 3 are, okay. I did it on 1 string though because I want you to see the actual distance between note 3 and 4, not just have this disappearing interval that goes on when you go from one string to another. Because let's face it, that's sort of what happens. You're like, okay, I put my finger here, I put my finger here, and then I go to the next string. Oh, wait. What happened when you went to the next string? From here to here, that's a whole step. Listen to the note. It's not a half step. That's a half step. All right, so I want you to be aware of that disappearing interval that happens and when you go from one string to the next, which is why we're doing it on 1 string. So that's the first piece of this, is knowing the interval spacing that makes up your scale, and the best way to do that initially is on 1 string. So if you started as a beginner with me and I started teaching you a scale, where did I teach it to you? 1 string, because that is the actual spacing of the notes without any disappearing interval. You need to be able to see the distance between every single note and its neighbor, not just some of them, or not 3 notes at a time and then suddenly an interval disappears because you move to another string. All right, so that's one of the biggest hang-ups I've seen with guitarists over the entire 15 odd years that I've been teaching. That getting lost with theory is over-reliance on fret numbers and not the actual note spacing and the hierarchy of the notes, okay? I'm calling these notes by number, not by their letter name, because this is the hierarchy of the harmony. Every minor scale is set up this way. So if you memorize this spacing, root note, whole step, half step, go another whole step, and then you have another whole step, half step. You know, I'm treating it with the disappearing interval, but it's just trichord, the whole step, half step, trichord, go up another whole step, and you have another whole step, half step, trichord. Now go up another whole step and just play all whole step. That's your 7th, and that's your root note. 8. 8 is the octave. Oct is the prefix meaning 8. The 8th note is the first note. There really is no 8. 8 is just 1 again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. You almost never need to actually play it this way, but this is about installing the knowledge of the spacing that makes the sound you want. And if you're tuned into my show, there's a good chance you like music in minor keys, because metal rules in minors better. So there's some exceptions, but minor is more serious and more impactful most of the time. We can always do things with dynamics and make, major stuff impactful, but generally we lean minor over here at ShredMentor. So anyway, that said, we need to now start to translate that into scales. And I don't want you to start going, okay, right, or reciting whatever 3 note per string scale that you have memorized. there's not a direct connection to that activity from what we just did. So let's slow that down a little bit. What we're going to do is actually work with something that I call fretboard sequence. Sorry, not sequences. Sorry, I looked at the word sequences. Fretboard synonyms. And that is like a synonym, basically two words that mean the same thing. Well, this is basically two different fretboard patterns that make the same sound with the same interval. And that is a good way to look at intervals on the fretboard because, all right, what's a half step? One fret, right? No, not always. Let's do B and C. There it is. Yeah, my half step is one fret, right? What if I'm playing this B here, though? And it's a 3-note per string scale, so, and it's time to go over here. That is also a half step, and that is not one fret apart. That's 4 frets apart. Sometimes that kind of thing is purposely used, like in a a Sepultura Chaos AD kind of style. They did a lot of that stuff. Just to, that kind of intentionally jarring kind of sound. That's a half step, and it sure as hell isn't one fret apart. So a half step is a semitone is when the notes are only one chromatic tone apart. It has nothing to do with the fretboard, frankly. The fretboard is just a mechanical tool to arrive at that sound, and there is more than one way that that's going to look. So a half step is going to look actually one of 3 ways, unless you start going into weird tunings like drop D or something. Then it's going to look like one of 4 ways. So everything that you do to change the tuning of the guitar is going to add additional ways that a half step might manifest. On a single string, a half step is 1 fret. That you can always rely on. As soon as you're dealing with more than one string, though, now every interval takes at least 2 or 3 shapes. Depends on how wide it is and how impractical they are. Okay, but on a single string, you should always look at that too. Sometimes we deal with wide intervals and we only look at the interval on 2 different strings, like a power chord. We'll get to that in a little bit. But all right, a half step, I said 3 different shapes and I only showed you 2. All right, so I'll use B and C for everything here, all right, just so that we can have the same 2 notes. Again, we're using the multiple locations strategy to identify this. So we're exploring, what does it look like here? What does it look like there? It's the same sound. I want to make the same sound, even if it's in a different octave. It's the same sound. I have a 7th string, so I can go that low. That will help a little bit with what we're doing, but if you don't have 7 strings, don't worry, you don't need them. I need them, but you don't need them. But anyway, all right, there's what we obviously know, right? Up 1 fret on the same string, that's a half step. Down 4 frets to the next higher string, that is also a half step. Unless those 2 strings are the 2nd and 3rd string. Same exact 2 pitches, but now I only have to go from the 16th fret to the 13th fret, so it's actually only 3 frets lower on the next higher sounding string. So the 2nd and 3rd string will always have their own special variation of whatever you would have done on any other string. And if you're doing something like drop D, then they're going to be really, really far apart. They're going to be 6 frets apart. It's basically 1 fret closer than however many frets apart you're tuned to. So if this is the 5th fret, then a half step will be only 4. In a way, it's like going up 1 string at the same fret is like going up 5 frets. So if I only want to go up 1 fret, I would subtract. So from 5 to 5, well, that's 5 frets, right? Because that's open to 5. So subtract 4 frets, and then I'll be only 1 fret. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there's my half step. Sounds like I'm a little out of tune on that string. Okay, let's stop that from happening. Mike, how you doing, man? Good evening. Not sure if anybody else is here, but I'm glad you are. Good to see you, Mike. All right, so that's what the half step is going to look like if it's not on the same string, if you're on most of the strings. But if you're on the 2nd and 3rd string, it'll be 1 fret closer because that's the 4th fret. So if you go to the same fret on the next string there, you're only going up 4 half steps. So subtract 3 from that, it's only 1. So a half step there is only 3 frets apart. So hopefully you see what I'm saying as far as fretboard synonyms. Now, it's not always going to be just one fret away, because unless you're going to go move your hand every single time to make it so you can play it that one way, you're severely going to be limiting yourself if you do that. So there's no unless. Don't do that. Learn what the different shapes of the specific intervals are. It's a worthwhile practice. I spent, I don't know, a couple months just memorizing it as a teenager in the mid-90s. You can do it too. It doesn't take long, but boy does it pay off. Because everything we do is based on intervals. So that's a half step. Now a whole step. And you can don't take on the whole octave today. As I said, I took maybe a month or two, maybe. I don't remember. I was a teenager. Frankly, I was stoned. So I don't know. I don't know how long it took. Sense of time was all screwed up. But I did it. I know I did it. I remember well enough that I did it, and I know exactly what I did. It was just probably a little more significant to me at the time. So anyway. So half step, whole step, minor third. Also, by the way, also known as minor second, major second, minor third, major third, perfect fourth, flat fifth or sharp fourth, or tritone, 3 names, 1 sound, 6 half steps, by the way. Keep track of how many half steps apart the notes are. And again, don't worry about frets apart unless you're actually on, going from the open string and recognizing how many frets apart that interval is. Very, very valuable, very important. Was definitely part of what I did as a teenager as I was memorizing these. Probably helped a little bit that I was still coming out of just constantly listening to almost nothing but Iron Maiden all the time. So I had things like the Wasted Years riff, because I basically just had almost the entire E minor scale minus the 7th note, because that riff does not contain a D. But anyway, yeah, you kind of get to know where your notes are in that case, but it's sort of like a stylized sequence of thirds, almost, slightly broken down. Fresh in mind, because I did talk to a student about this last week, I think. But anyway, so getting to know your intervals. And I know in the early days of me playing, maybe the first 2 or 3 years, especially the first 2 years, I listened to a lot of Iron Maiden, as I said, and a lot of their stuff is in the key of E minor. So I would play all of it. I would try to play all of my melodies on the first string. So that was not the most efficient or the correct way to play them, but I definitely got to know where my notes of the E minor scale are on the first string. And when I ran out of notes, because the notes went lower than the high E, I got to know where those 3 additional notes are on the second string as well. Okay, anyway, yeah, let me just put the lid on, because I know if I don't, I will spill it all over my equipment. All right, so that's fretboard synonyms, okay? I hope that is a sufficient way of going through it, but do note that the intervals themselves, as they get wider and wider, are going to be harder to play on one string with one hand, unless you're starting from the open string. So, as much as you should learn it on one string, coming from the open string as if it's the root note, root to second, again, you know your minor scale in particular. A major second is 2 frets. A minor third is 3 frets. Those 2 are just a giveaway. It's very, very convenient that the minor third and the major second, the second and third note of the minor scale, happen to be at the 2nd and 3rd fret of an open string, at least. But it's 2 and 3 frets higher, respectively, from whatever note you're doing. So if I grab that note, sounds like a G sharp. Yep. Whole step, half step, right? 2 frets and then 2 frets, 3 frets. So your minor scale is very easy to remember from that perspective. All right, but once you start getting into a perfect fourth, well, that's probably the easiest way to play a fourth. Unless, of course, you're on the 2nd and 3rd string, then it'll be 1 fret apart. So even that, it's going to look a little bit different depending on where you're playing it. And then you have, on most strings, it's going to look like this. On the 2nd and 3rd string, it'll be looking like, it'll look like a power chord looks everywhere else. A perfect fifth now, okay? It's a string skip. It's also 2 frets away, but a string skip. So if your upper note of the perfect fifth and the lower note, it's still 2 frets away, but if you skip over the middle string there, so from the 1st to the 3rd string, or from the 2nd to the 4th string, it'll be 2 frets away. However, everywhere else in the lower range, so if you have a 7, 8, 9, 10 or more string, you're going to find that that's actually an extra fret away. So I'll do like, well, let me go back to the original key here. B to E. You know your power chord shape, that's a perfect fifth. Here, at the 7th fret of my 1st string, the 9th fret of my 3rd string. Sometimes that's what that's going to look like. Up here, 12th fret of the 2nd string, 14th fret of the 4th string. Now, however, a power chord is a power chord, except for on these 2 strings. On the 2nd and 3rd string, a power chord, your standard way, is still going to be an extra fret apart, right? So here, that's what a B and an E is going to look like here. I go to my 4th fret, 3rd string. It's going to be 3 frets higher, 2 strings lower. And higher and lower, I mean in number and sound, by the way. Strings wise, when I say a lower string, I mean the lower sounding string. I'm not talking about closer to the floor. I'm talking about the sound. Okay? When I say a higher fret, I mean higher in number. Higher, to me, it always means higher sound. Lower, to me, always means lower sound. So just to help you translate what I'm saying here, I want to make this as easy for you as possible. And I realize not everybody means that, especially the earlier you are in playing. When you go lower, a lot of the time that means go closer to the floor. Totally understandable, but that's not what it means. Not when I say it. Okay, so that being said, okay, every interval is going to look a little bit different, and every chord voicing and arpeggio voicing is going to look different for that reason, because that's just more intervals, okay? So the next thing, all right, that is, I just want to instill that into you, is don't rely so much about put my finger here, put my finger here, put my finger here, but like, okay, why? What are these notes in this inside of this scale? Okay, so I'm going to use just minor, just natural minor, also known as Aeolian, as our default scale tonight. Just to, you do this with whatever scale you like to play that sounds like it. If it happens to be this one, bonus for you. If it happens to be the minor pentatonic scale, then just omit notes 2 and 6 from what I'm playing here, and you have that. It's exactly where it is. It would just be open plus 3 frets, plus 2 frets, plus 2 frets, plus 3 frets, plus 2. So it's minor third, major second, minor third, major second. That starts over. All right, so when you're playing, you know, oops, went natural minor again. Anyway, as you do that kind of thing, you're just playing that same interval pattern over and over again. So get to know it on a single string so that you are aware of the intervals that you are sort of not having to pay attention to as you go from string to string. That's still an interval, and by paying attention to that whole thing I just said about fretboard synonyms, that should help a little bit. Okay, now, one of the other things that I strongly recommend that you do is when you do have a melody, purposely move it to another mode. Okay, don't just transpose it. Okay, so if I take the crazy train riff, all right, break that down into the scale degrees. Okay, that's 1. This is your root note. 1, 1, 5, 1. This is the minor scale, so I'm just going to say 6. I'm not going to clarify flat 6, flat 3, or whatever, unless there's something different about it from how it would have been in the scale. And in this case, there isn't. It's just purely F sharp, natural minor. Okay. So the numbers are 1, 1, 5, 1, 6, 1, 5, 1. Again, slower. 1, 1, 5, 1, 6, 1, 5, 1. and the other half is 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 7. 7 is the note below 1 because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8 is 1, so the note right below 1 is 7. Very unintuitive at first, I know, but that is all it is. Dave Murray and Adrian Smith are great. Yeah, tandem as dual guitarists. I know they rule. I know that was those guys. That particular pair of guitarists are the reason I picked up the guitar in the first place. And I've just been on an Iron Maiden kick. I'm off of it now, but I was listening to Killers last week, like on loop, and ever since I stopped, it's still on loop in my head, and I have Murders in the Rue Morgue, you know, going through my head right now. Even now, actually, I'm kind of fighting it. But yeah. Yeah, so I can just keep it. That little section is just on insanity loop in my head, and it's just driving me crazy. But anyway, yes, you don't need to tell me. I love Iron Maiden, but I am getting a little tired of hearing Murders in the Rue Morgue on loop in my head. Just happens to me. It's always something. At least it's a song I actually like. So on a positive note. Yeah, sorry, get me going on Iron Maiden. There's no turning back. Okay, so so we've broken down the Crazy Train riff. I choose this because I know, you know, I hope you don't like tire of this song on the level that I do, but I know that it's very famous and most people tend to know this riff early on even, so it's going to reach the widest range of people. All right, so 1 1 5 1 6 1 5 1 4 3 2 3 4 3 2. All right, if I'm going to move this to the relative major, it's going to go up to the third of the scale. That's where the relative major lives in a minor scale. So and in fact, that would be a perfect direct harmony if I decided to go with thirds as well. It's exactly the same formula, but I've moved it up 2 notes in the scale, not transposed it, I've modulated it. Big difference, okay? I'm moving it to where the notes of the same scale are, so I have to adjust my fingering, get used to how the different note spacing from that particular mode. But mode 3 of minor is major, so you can sort of save yourself a little bit of confusion or extra thinking by recognizing that major and minor aren't so much different things. I mean, they are, but for a practical usage of this, major lives at mode 3 of minor. Now, we always hear about minor. Isn't that the mode 6? Yes, it is the mode. It is the 6th mode of major, but what do you think is closer? 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? You know, starting from major is the default. It's just how the Western system of music theory is written. And what is the root note of that by default? Beginning of the alphabet, of course. C. No, that's not the beginning of the alphabet. A, where A minor lives, is the default. That's the beginning. Minor. Somebody who devised the English system of notation knew what's up. They started it from minor. Anyway, they're both true, okay? The 3rd mode of minor is major. The 6th mode of major is minor. A, B, C. So A minor, C major. Start from C. C, D, E, F, G, A. Note 6. So they're both true. But since everything's based on major, and for some reason everybody feels compelled to teach everybody major all the time, even still, when stuffy aristocrats aren't paying for it anymore, it's just free for all now. We're still just following the tradition of teaching major first and only. But that's what I'm here for. Metal, minor, and a story. Okay, so sequences, okay? What I just did was I used the Crazy Train riff as a sequence. Ooh, and I'm using it on the wrong key now. I can do it from every mode of the scale too, like, oh, see. That's Locrian. It's going to be ugly no matter what you do. This is Ionian, or the 3rd mode of minor. Dorian. Sounds like the original riff, but it's a little bit ruined in the beginning because that minor 6th is doing something much more ominous than what's going on in the 6th of Dorian, which is basically just minor with a raised sixth. So it's almost the same scale from here as it is down there. But this is mode 4, not mode 1. Mode 5 is going to be almost the same too, but the flat second. So you won't even hear it until the end. That is the 5th mode. That's what Phrygian sounds like. Lydian is almost just like major. It's the down here for major, just for reference. Lydian would have been this is as opposed to major. They both have major chords associated to them, so they're sort of similar sounding. And here is Mixolydian, which is almost the same as major 2. But there's a whole step below the root there. Right? So anyway, that's all 7 flavors that live right in the same key. That's a really good way to kind of get to know your fretboard. Once again, just don't feel like you have, once again, don't try to cover the entire octave right now. This is not what you do in a sitting, but that's what the entire exercise is like. That's all the knowledge in there. I've already done this slowly, gradually, in fact, one good strategy, I didn't even write in my notes, but the 3 modes strategy. Don't just learn one shape today. If you already have just a melody like this, or if you already know, this riff, it's a good place to start. You can, the Crazy Train riff still has some use for you yet. Start with the original one and go 2 more modes, or go to the mode below it too. Play it an octave higher, or and then go with the mode below it, and then go to the original, and go up a mode. And so then just take on 3 modes today. Take on 1 main mode, that's your central mode, and the 2 surrounding modes, the one below it in the scale and the one above it in the scale. And then just call it a day. If you feel like you need more time with that tomorrow, do it again tomorrow. Do it for a couple days. Absorb it. Don't try, it's not a race across all of the information. If it's like trying to speed read a book, but not actually not absorbing any of it. If you're reading comprehensions out the going out the window with it, then you're not getting it. Speed reading is not good at all. So it's the same idea here. Don't try to race through all the material and cover the whole fretboard, because you're going to do it badly, and then leave it there. And don't tell yourself that just merely going over the material, covering the material isn't worth jack shit if you're not actually absorbing it. All right, so quality time with less information. It's not a race across the fretboard. It's not a race to cover all the material quickly all at once, because you have to take on something that is bite-sized, or else it's worthless. Okay? So anyway, 5th mode sound like Sweet Dreams by Eurythmics. There is a very similar, I had to think, that's a C minor. It sounds like down here you have it's very 1-6-5 in C minor on that one, so I can see why it would do that. Oh no, is it? Yeah. Let's see, Sweet Train, Crazy Dreams. Trying to merge those together. That is not a mashup waiting to happen, I'll say that. but I hear what you mean, though. I can see why, from remembering the general harmonic makeup of at least the verse of Sweet Dreams. A lot of the time the name of the song is in the chorus, but I think in that one it's the verse. Okay, so let's see. So we've basically used sequences, and I think this is one of the most important things as far as knowing your fretboard chords. It's not just knowing your fretboard; it's knowing which finger to use in which situation. All right. So I use sequences because they're a great tool, and I wrote a whole book about them, the Book of Sequences. But like one that just things that are friendly to the hand and fit right on 2 strings like that, 3 notes per string. All right, there's one that I put in the Book of Sequences called the 6-note zigzag, and it's called that because there are 6 notes in it, and it basically just goes up and down and up. It's just sort of the melody. If you played connect the dots with the notes in the notation, it just kind of makes a zigzag shape. All right. So what you do is basically just play 6 notes straight up, linear. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Back down. 5, 4, 3, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Don't double up any note whatsoever. No doubled up notes. Every note is different from the last one that played. But don't just come back down after you hit note 6 the second time. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. So the second time you hit the 6th note, you start again immediately, because that actually is 16 beats. All right, so that was 4 times through it. All right, but this would be this finger combination. There's no roll whatsoever for the middle finger in this particular mode. But when I move it to mode 2 of the same scale, E natural minor. Oops. Now there is no roll whatsoever for my ring finger, which had all of the middle note stuff to do last time. So this is another reason to get used to the different modes. And now here, if I move up another mode to the 3rd mode of the scale, Ionian, it's actually the exact same fingers rather, as the 2nd mode, Locrian, but I also now have a whole step between my 2nd and 1st finger on both of these strings. So it is different. It's a different feeling. It's different motor memory. The mode feels different to play, looks different on the fretboard. So and it's learning the fretboard, so the picking doesn't have to change. The picking should not change. It's exactly the same picking because it's the exact same note sequence, just applied to a different set of 6 notes. And this would be the same even if you're doing just chromatics. The picking should be identical because there's nothing changing about the note layout. It's just where your 6 notes are across 2 strings. Does not change at all. It's still 16 beats long as a melody, so it should work. So if I'm doing pure chromatics, same sequence, just applied to the chromatic scale, 3 notes per string. Not a very friendly way to play the chromatic scale, but that at least keeps the sequence intact. Okay, so I have a couple very important other things I want to talk to you about. And so some big takeaways so far. I don't want these to fall by the wayside. So think in intervals and scale degrees, not just fret numbers anymore. Fully absorb the actual frets, like interval spacing on a single string of whatever scale you're going to use the most. Starting now, whatever scale you know best right now would probably be that scale. If you know multiple scales, then pick your favorite and start with those. Get one of them to be default and start with that. Just you have to make a choice at some point. But getting to know the actual scale by how far apart the notes are is everything right now. So do it on a single string. Treat the open string initially as the root note of whatever that scale is. Get to know exactly, count your way through the interval, through the scale degree notes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Don't worry about the fret numbers. You can pay attention later to that, but that's secondary because they're not always going to be at that fret number. So don't have too much of a reliance on that particular way of knowing the note spacing. Look at the relative spacing. 2 frets higher. Because when I go to play that E somewhere else, it's still 2 frets higher. Don't rely on fret 2 for all of your F sharps. There's quite a few others. Oops. 7. I have to think about that. No, brain fart. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So knowing where to find them on each string is a little bit more important, and those are fret numbers you can memorize. That will help. I'm not going to pretend that doesn't help, but that's a very long, tedious way to try to memorize it, especially when you're actually, unless you only need to play an F sharp, that's not particularly valuable either. So playing it within the key of E minor, for example, which is like the guitar key, the guitar itself is tuned to an E minor. That's probably a better way. Where is F sharp in relation to E? A whole step higher. It's the second note. Where's G in relation to both? G is a step and a half higher, 3 frets higher than E, and it's a half step higher than F sharp. Deal with the two, deal with like the small fragments. Dan, how you doing, man? And thanks for tagging others to come along too. So you have a piece of your scale here, and another one, and that's actually what we play. That's when I played that sequence a moment ago. Right, and you can add whatever phrasing you like at the end of those two. But that's what this is. That's 1, 2, 3 of the scale. That's 4, 5, 6, and that's 7 bending into 1. So when I jump all over the fretboard, I'm not losing track of where they are in terms of their relationship to each other. There are no like vanishing intervals as I go from one string to the next, because I paid attention to that. Otherwise, I also would be dealing with that, because that's sort of what happens. It's like, okay, whole step. Then I play whole step. Wait a minute, what happened to that? That's a half step. It's whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. Yes, that's a whole step. And it's not 2 frets because I'm not on the same string. So it's not always going to be a half step equals 1 fret and a whole step equals 2 frets. So the next thing is learn your fretboard synonyms for every single interval. Take the time, do that work, do the thinking. The thinking is the work, by the way. So if you're ever looking for a shortcut, don't shortcut the thinking, because that is the work. It's all mental, okay? Memorizing, I mean, that's what knowledge is, okay? You don't know anything unless you haven't memorized it. If you need to refer to a book, you don't yet have that memorized. You don't know it yet, because if in order to remember something you need to look at it, that isn't memorized yet, is it? Still working on it, you know? So yeah, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Major, exactly. You heard that in there. Good. Very good, Mike. Exactly. So, and starting from minor, if you go into there, go to that last whole step in that same pattern. Take that, tack it onto the beginning instead. Remove the WH from what you just said there, Mike. Tag that onto the beginning, and that's the minor scale. So whole step, half step, and then recite everything from the beginning of that. Whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. There, that's it. That's where it cuts off. So major and minor are part of the same looping pattern. You're just on the next to last note. That last whole step and half step, that's whole step, half step. That's the minor scale piece I'm showing you that I'm starting with. That's minor. So yes, exactly. Yeah, you know what? I'll add that to the chat so it's cemented into the video too. There you go. And there's that. Apparently my name is Restream.io, but hopefully not. Hopefully it'll go in there as ShredMentor. But anyway, that's me. Same concept. But yeah, exactly. All right, so now, very important, 2 other things, and this will help you if you know them, but it will help a lot. All right, and this is something else I actually talked about a couple days ago with the very same student I was talking about Iron Maiden with, too, actually. So this one is called the diminished 7th framework. There's 2 things I refer to as frameworks, and they're basically a fairly easy to remember pattern that you can then insert other notes into while using it as your visual reference across the fretboard. This can help a lot. This is good for a harmonic minor now, okay? So your diminished 7th is a pattern that basically, it's a very friendly 2-note per string. Yes, apparently my name is Restream on there. That's me. All right, I'm in A minor again, so actually, let's move this to. Okay, so diminished seventh, okay, is basically a root note, the minor third, the flat fifth, so it's like a diminished triad at first. It's like minor, but with the fifth flattened a half step. This is what already happens at note 2 of the scale anyway. So in the key of A minor, just for reference, B, D, and F. Notes 2, 4, and 6 of the scale already actually do that. So from here, that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's a flat, that's a minor third, okay? From here, that's called a flat fifth from this perspective. Very dissonant, okay? But everything so far is 3 frets higher, 3 frets higher. Then the next one, what we call a flat, flat seventh, flat, flat seventh, is another 3 frets higher. So normally a flat 7 is just a whole step lower than the root, but this is another 3 frets lower than the root. So B, remember I started on B, D, F, and then G sharp would be the next note that I play in the scale. Okay, that's by raising the 7th note of natural minor, you get something called harmonic minor. And excuse me. That's what gives you that more classical or Arabian kind of sound. Excuse me. But anyway, by moving that note up a half step, it used to be F, G, A, which was whole step, whole step. But if I move this note only, now it's step and a half, half step. But these two notes didn't move anywhere. So the whole interval relationship around that one note changes because only that note moved. The other ones around it didn't. So the interval relationship of that note to every other note in the scale actually changes by 1 fret in one direction or another. All right. So now from F to G sharp, you actually have a step and a half. Even though that's what's referred to as a sharp second in this case, it's another 3 half-step interval. That's what we need to worry about. So right, so now I've put that within the context of the A harmonic minor scale and broken down what that actually is. Now let's go reinsert some notes. I'll stay in an A harmonic minor so we're not losing track of it. Our notes are B, D, F, G sharp. All right, keep that in mind. If we start with like D and F on one string and then do like the G sharp and the B on the next string, we can do this entirely on 2 strings because the next 2 strings are just going to be the same thing an octave lower. So this repeats every 2 strings an octave lower or higher. So what we're going to do now is use this diminished 7th pattern as sort of a framework visually to insert other notes of the harmonic minor scale back into it, like this. So, well, it's a third of some sort, so I'm going to add the note in between right there. And now here, the note of the harmonic minor scale that falls in between these 2 notes is right here. So it actually alternates which middle finger you're going to use. Here it uses the ring finger, the 3rd finger. Here it uses the middle finger, the 2nd finger. So every other string, it's going to alternate like that. Ring finger, middle finger, ring finger, middle finger, ring finger. If I had an 8th string, it would be middle finger. Even numbers of strings are really helpful for this. So I wish I kind of either use my 8 or 10 string tonight, but whatever. So I actually used this in the second solo, the final solo in my last released single, Sycophant. So go to jasonaaronwood.com. Hey, no, I'm not going to tell you where to go. I'm just going to type it right in there. Go to aaronwood.bandcamp.com/track/sycophant. Listen to that song. I'm very proud of it. Maybe it's not the best mix in the world, but listen to the whole thing through. Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully the lyrics don't describe anybody you know, but sadly I think we all probably know a few people that song describes. Sucks, but anyway, that's not what I'm showing you. Listen to the solos, but the second one, the end of it is very it's I forget what key was I in. I was tuned down a half step, and it ended up ending on C sharp. That was the very but I did it like crazy fast. So like, yeah, something like that, but probably even faster on that particular song. But anyway, that's it. I'm using this exact same pattern. So that's exactly all that is. That's a quick way that you can kind of, add additional notes and get a very, it still has a similar kind of sound to the diminished seventh, but it has more depth to the harmony because it's now, well, you have all but one of the 7 notes of harmonic minor in there too. So it has more depth. It's kind of a sort of a hybrid between the harmonic minor sound and the straight diminished seventh sound because it's based on the diminished seventh, very easy to follow pattern. So it's pretty hard to get lost there because all you're doing is just doing a 2-note string diminished seventh and alternating which middle finger, because it's a 3-note per string scale kind of approach. So it's basically, when you have a 3-note per string scale, these two, you almost have a 3-finger hand. One of these 2 fingers is on standby to just play whichever note is the middle, depending on what the more sensible place is to put it, whichever the 2 fingers down. Okay, so yeah, that was really well said. Stumbled through that, but anyway, yeah, I think you know what I mean. So if the note is closer to the note this finger's playing, use that finger, and if it's closer to the note that finger's playing, use that finger. Simple. And if it's right in the middle for some reason, which it shouldn't be because that's not how this pattern works, if it's right in the middle and it's the same number of frets, your 2 outer fingers are too far apart. So there. But in general, if that is the case with some other pattern, use the middle finger if it's dead center. If it's 2 frets in from both outer notes, use the middle finger because it's sort of right in the middle of the hand. Easier to get a wider stretch between these 2 fingers than between those 2 fingers. It just doesn't want to happen. Okay, so anyway, that's sort of how that works. Okay, so now there is one more final thing I want to show you, and I saved it for the end, and probably I'm not going to have enough time to go over it fully, but I'm going to hint at it. It's very similar in the sense that you establish one pattern, and then you use that as a reference point visually to find the other notes nearby. Okay, same kind of, when I use the word framework for that, because to me it makes sense. Hopefully you get the gist of where I'm coming from with that. Give it your own name if you want, but if I ever bring that up again and you are watching now, then you'll hopefully remember what I mean. This I call the arpeggio framework. And yes, diminished seventh is a kind of arpeggio, but I'm talking more about sweep arpeggio shapes now. So I'm going to use the E minor 7-note, 5-string 7-note kind of standard shape. All right. Whether you can sweep or not, it's not really important, but know this shape. Might as well start working on it now anyway, just so you can sort of sweep a little bit. And more importantly, know where the hell to find your notes, because inside of that, it's just a chord. It's just like a movable A minor chord with a bar chord version, right? That's it, but also you're adding your third here. You're playing these 2 notes that you usually use 2 fingers for with 1 finger. It's the same thing. Right? But we're skipping over a note when we go from here to here. Root 5th, well, where's the 3rd? Root 3rd, 5th. Root 3rd, 5th. Get up there, extra 5 frets. 5 frets is in the doable zone, so if it's hard, keep doing it till it's not hard. All right, now, that's great, but where are the rest of the notes of the scale? Let's say I want to add in some extra color. I will add, well, let's look at what they are. Root 3rd, 5th. Where's the 6th? Remember the crazy train riff. What if I play the crazy train riff from right here? There's the 6, right? So, no. There's the 6th again, 5, 6. So now I'm adding just the minor 6th, like everywhere I can find it. Everywhere I cross it. 1, 3, 5. So right above the 5, a half step above 5, in the minor scale is where 6 is. 1, 3, 5, go up a half step, there's my 6. I could also just add one of them. I can just retain the entire regular sweep shape. And then do that. I don't really need that entire root note if I don't need it, but it depends on what I want in my melody. But since the shape itself, the sweep already kind of works because there's 2 notes on the outer strings and there's just 1 note each on the inner strings, I could just replace that with, instead of that, I'll do, works fine. And I could do it with a major arpeggio for the chord below it. Right? So I can add some more color into what I'm doing by adding some surrounding notes. But I can only do that if I'm aware of which notes I'm actually playing in the first place. So anyway, this general approach I refer to as the arpeggio framework. Okay, just slightly different from the diminished seventh framework, because that's more like, I should probably call that the 2-note per string diminished seventh framework, because that's really what that original one is. It's kind of very singular of purpose. But this one, anywhere you can visualize an arpeggio, and it doesn't have to be a sweep arpeggio. So it's basically, the question you sort of probably should ask yourself to get this to work for you is, like, inside of this arpeggio, where's the rest of the scale? Okay, that's sort of what we're trying to do. And that's where I get, you know, some kind of fun extra licks that I can kind of add into things like... Actually, that's actually something I actually did in the song The Winds of the East on O Sonuf Glass Idols. I think it's track 3. I actually used Hungarian minor on the way down at the very beginning. Root 3rd 5th, root 3rd 5th, root 5th, sharp 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 2, then 6, let's see, 6, 5, 6, 5, 4, regular 4 now. That's kind of a ornamented sequence of 3s. So. Yeah, that's basically how that beginning goes. So that's one way you can... you do that kind of thing a lot with harmonic minor. Root 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, raised 7, sometimes even melodic minor, raised 6, 2. So it's sort of like just taking an arpeggio, but a little section of it you're just going to deal with kind of the scale and the surrounding notes. You know, it helps you to get out of either just doing arpeggios or just doing scale. You know, that's they're a little too monochrome each. So combining them together can give you some very solid melodies that are interesting, and but solid in the sense that they really work very well with the underlying chord that you're trying to play with too. So the melodies themselves are interesting because sometimes you have skipping intervals, sometimes you have adjacent intervals, or notes between adjacent notes and notes that are non-adjacent. So that it can help a lot with the actual sound of a melody, and of course changing up, you know, the order of the notes and stuff in your melody can help a lot for that too. But this is about exploring your fretboard. So these are very good ways of doing it, and I recommend you at least adopt a couple of them. Start with one at the very least here, whichever one speaks to you the most. But yeah, that's kind of the gist here. If you haven't already grabbed the download, let me see if I have it. Anyway, yes, this is... I'll put this link in the chat here. It's going to take a second here. And of course, by the way, having guitar practice tools is a really good way to kind of develop these skills further, like using the drones that you see on the screen, right? Well, just up until just now. Because then you are actually able to hear that particular note as a root note and kind of hear everything in context and not get kind of just randomly off course as random things happen. But let me throw this in here too. You should use this to write down the patterns that you learn. There we go. There. Now it's in the chat. And hopefully, there we go. There's the blank diagrams pack. Completely free. Just enter the email where you want to receive it and you will have it. And then you'll then you'll be able to be further equipped with just one more tool to help you to memorize and further explore and chart this fretboard. Okay, the fretboard itself in theory are just tools there to help you. It's not about strict rules, but you know, it's not about getting limited. It's about getting help and getting tools to help you chart out where the sounds you want to make in your music are. Like it says, so the major and minor scales on a scale degree would be 1 tonic, 2 supertonic. You know, I have to be honest, I never ever used that naming. It looks right, but frankly, 4 subdominant, 5 dominant, and 1 tonic. Those are the 3 that I know, and you're probably right, but I actually never ever use those. I just use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If those names help you, that's great. To me, that has never helped me very much, so I don't use it. Frankly, if I was to check what you just said, whether it's true or not, I would look on Wikipedia. and I do trust Wikipedia in matters of music theory enough that I would check there. Unfortunately, I'm not the guy to ask because I don't think of it that way. I just simply, less information is better to me, honestly, really, like, because the more you have to think about, the more your concentration is taken up with that task rather than just playing it. So mapping it out ahead of time, yeah, I've never needed tonic, supertonic, median, subdominant. Again, the only 3 that I'm sure of are tonic, subdominant, and dominant, which you have correct, 1, 4, and 5. Outside of that, I never took the time to really memorize those. I've seen all those terms before, but I have never ever used them. And even the 3 that I know, I don't pay attention to. But that said, in a minor scale, 1, or I actually use the mode names. 1 is Aeolian, 2 is Locrian, and I do use them, but I don't use them as much. To me, it's the type of flavor I'm playing. So the mode name to me is the name of the sound I'm making, right? And by the way, the link on the chat that I just put there, which is now not visible, is the page that you're seeing here. So I'm going to go in 1 second though, because I do have to leave and go be a dad again here. But let's go back to the news screen here real quick. That link up there on the screen though, whoops, I pasted it twice. So that link will not get you anything. Let's try that again because I pasted it twice. So I would recommend instead, Mike, memorize the modes in order and by the scale degree of major. You're going to be playing major, do it as Ionian as 1, do Ionian, most of you're actually 20. That's just never come once. I feel like those are words for professors who and no much it. Stick with 1 and to where the relative major is, and I do appreciate you watching. I do hope to chart your way around on the fretboard. Be sure to grab adopt at least one of these things tonight and every single day.